So there's an old Indian tale about 4 blind men and an elephant. Perhaps you've heard this story before. These 4 blind men approach the elephant, and they're all at different parts of this creature. And as they walk up to the elephant, one of them touches its trunk and says that it must be a snake. Another one touches one of its legs and says, well, clearly it's a tree trunk. Another one runs its hand along the tail of the elephant and says, well, that's very clearly a rope to me. And finally, the last one walks up and puts both hands right along the side of this massive creature, unmoving, and says, well, it's a wall. All 4 of them approaching the same thing, but from different perspectives. I suspect that if I asked all of you outright right now what it is that you believe God looks like, our question of faith for today, there would be as many answers in this room as there are all of you. After all, what does God look like anyway? If you look around the meeting house and Brooks Hall this morning, you will note some images of God. Throughout these last few weeks, we have had some of our children from our church school program and some of our children from our children's and youth choirs, our young adults who have been working on a photo project throughout Lent on Facebook, and some of our adults identifying images of God, the ones that speak most clearly to who they believe God is and what it is that God looks like. These images that came back, as you can see, are as varied as the people who provided them for us, ranging in age from 3 to middle-aged, from all sorts of backgrounds, from all sorts of places and walks of life. Each of us can't help but determine our own image for God based on our own background, our own relationship with God, our own perspective. There's this great children's book called In God's Name. I use it at the beginning of confirmation class every year. And in it, there are all these different people who come up with names for God based on their experience for God. So the farmer who works the earth calls God source of life. And the soldier who's tired from war calls God maker of peace. And the one who works with the ill calls God healer. And it's not until they all come together toward the end of the book that they have an opportunity to see God from other people's perspectives and other people's images. And that's what happens when we come together in a community like this, a trusted community of fellow believers where we are able to share openly and honestly with one another about what it is that we believe about God, about who it is that God is for us. When that happens, our images of God, our beliefs, can be challenged or enhanced or changed or solidified altogether. We ask this question of faith, what does God look like, on an interesting day, as we've just heard the passage from the Gospel of Mark about Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, the one that has come to mark this day as Palm Sunday. As we enter into this story, we encounter Jesus on the road on his way to Jerusalem, and they're approaching this village, he and his disciples, and he says to 2 of his disciples, well, go, and you'll find a donkey, the colt of a donkey. Untie it and bring it to me. And so these 2 disciples follow Jesus' directions, and they go into the village, and they find this colt, and they untie it, and they start to lead it away. Now, I have heard this story from the Gospel of Mark and the other Gospels, the story of Palm Sunday, every year of my life, as many of you have. And it's always so interesting to figure out the thing that kind of sticks out for us. And every year it's something different for me. This year, all I could think about was the reaction of the people who were standing around as the disciples went and untied this colt and started walking it away. They kind of just let it happen. That's what it says in the Bible, at least. But as I imagine kind of getting inside their head, I think of 3 different responses. One, well, go ahead. It's not my colt anyway. Take it away. The second one is perhaps they actually knew Jesus or believed in Jesus, and so they're thinking, well, if Jesus said he needed it, then go ahead and take it. Must be important. But the one that seems to strike a chord with me that I imagined is that these people must have been a bit surprised or perhaps even flabbergasted as they watched these people walk away with something that was not their own property. After all, how often do you hear the words Lord and donkey used in the same sentence with one another? What kind of Lord must this be who would enter into the big city on the back of a colt of a donkey? This should be interesting. Certainly, as Bryn pointed out in her children's sermon today, this was not the kind of king that people were expecting. Not the one that they had anticipated to come and overthrow the powers of the time and bring about justice for those who had been kept down for so long. Riding a donkey, wearing a simple robe and sandals, proclaiming peace be with you to all of the people around. This was not the God that anyone expected to come into Jerusalem that day. So if we see Jesus bearing God's image, then Holy Week becomes a really interesting week to explore the different images of God. Because on that Palm Sunday, we see this triumphant God being brought into the city with cloaks and palms waving around. The next day, though, he is the God that is in the picture that's on this wall over here, an angry God, overturning the tables of the money changers, cursing all of the religious leaders who were failing to take care of their people. By Thursday, he's kneeling down at the feet of his disciples, acting as a servant, washing their feet, and then reclining with them at one last meal as they celebrate the Passover together, identifying the one who will betray him, and then going out into the garden and weeping to God, praying that this is all just some kind of bad dream and he's going to wake up and everything will be fine, that he won't have to give his life in response to all of the evil that people had been doing to one another. Then finally, this God turns himself over as a sacrifice with his final words, those of forgiveness for all of the people around him. Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Throughout this coming week, if we walk this Holy Week journey faithfully, then we will see our God triumphant and angry and serving and relaxing and celebrating with friends, weeping, healing, and forgiving. The best that humanity has to offer. What is the image of God that you bring with you as you go about your daily lives out in the world? Is it any of those images? God the servant, God the triumphant, riding on the back of a donkey? Is it one of these images that you see around you today? God that is as unknown and as expansive as the sky. God who is as close and intimate as the touch of a parent and a child. God who is in the faces of those we learn from and those who we serve. God who holds the whole world in his hand. God who shines light into the dark parts and places of our lives. The image that stood out to me this week as I looked at all of these and then placed them on the walls as well was the one that Poppy drew, which is that orange one over on the wall over there. I invite you all to, at the end of worship, come in and look around and check these all out because they're really, really cool. But it's the orange one over there. And what Poppy said as she was drawing that was, God wears a majestic robe that has the pictures of everyone who has ever lived on it. God who bears the image of all of our faces, who bears the imprint of all of our lives. You see, friends, in the Bible it says that we are made in the image and in the likeness of God. So then it would make sense that as we look at the people we are sitting next to in these pews today, and as we look at the people that we see as we walk out into the world, then we should be able to see a glimpse of God, of that image of who God is, of what it is that God looks like. But that word likeness is a really interesting one, because it means something more than just to look like something. It means to be like something or someone. What would it mean for us to accept being made in the image and the likeness of God? What would it mean for us? How would we learn in a different way about who God is, if that were the case? How would our images of God perhaps change? What would it mean for us to strive to be all the best that humanity has to offer each and every day? We could celebrate and relax. We could be angry, and not at things like the traffic that I am angry at just about every day, but about the things that break God's heart instead. The things like people hurting one another, and poverty and injustice, and the things that we do to our world and to others. We could weep and wrestle and struggle with the tough things that are asked of us, even as we could turn ourselves over to God and God's will. We could offer genuine and honest love and forgiveness. I love this passage from Philippians that Richard just read for us. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. He made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant. In God's likeness, we are called to serve those closest to us, those here in our church community, and those in the communities in which we engage in the world each and every day. Now, the truth is that we can never know everything there is to know about our God, because our God is as mysterious to us as God is known to us. Our God is as far away as the heavens and as close to us as our very breath. But there is something that the Quakers say and believe, shout out Joni Park, there is that of God in every person. If we are looking for an image of God, my friends, we need to pay attention to the ways that God uses each and every one of us to serve out in the world using the gifts that we have been offered. The ways that a divine spark shines in each person who accepts the call to do the good of God. For us to say that we are made in the image and the likeness of God is not just a statement of belief or faith, it is an invitation, my friends. So, may we say yes to bearing God's image and love out into the world through our living, not only as we walk this Holy Week faithfully, but each and every day of our lives. Amen.